Hi, before we get started, I wanted to take a moment as a former Los Angeles resident to acknowledge what's happening in Southern California and the devastating fires that are affecting the community. My heart goes out to the people, the firefighters, and even the animals that have been impacted by this. If you would like to help by sending a monetary donation, I have posted a list in the show notes of qualified 501c3 organizations that are helping those affected by the wildfires, hoping for containment and recovery. Now to the show. Hello, and thank you for watching and listening to the Wine-Centric Show, where we talk to the titans of the wine business, but make it simple and digestible for all. And today, I have a rising titan of this industry. She is the senior U.S. editor for JancisRobinson.com and also the host for one of the best shows in the biz, Wine in 5. She is Samantha Cole-Johnson.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Sam.
Good to be here.
Thanks for being here. I want to tell everybody, if you have even a smidge of interest in the wine business and you consider yourself an intelligent person or somewhat have means of the brain, you should be watching Wine in 5 on Instagram.
I'm so glad you like it. I think it's a bit niche sometimes while I'm doing it. I'm like, man, this really appeals to the industry, and we are a consumer publication, but there's been such great feedback that I think it's wonderful.
It's so informative, and you're a writer, but you are so good on camera. Do you edit? Do you use a teleprompter? Do you memorize everything?
So in terms of the Wine News in 5, yes, I write that 2 days beforehand, and it goes through 2 rounds of edits from our executive editor, or actually our managing editor, Tara Q. Thomas, and then our deputy editor, Andrew Morris, and they catch all kinds of things, and then I use a teleprompter for that. It didn't start out that way. It started as a side project that I did in one evening where I just was like, we need something on social media. We need something in video form. I'm thinking I want to do this thing. And they were like, cool, throw it out on Instagram. It'll be great. And then it got traction. They were like, all right, so we should probably also put that on the site. And then we should also edit you. And I'm like, all right, that's fair. There are a lot of people watching this at this point. So it needs to be edited.
Yeah. But I mean, it doesn't seem that way. It seems completely natural. And I'm like, how does she get all those words out so perfectly without pausing, and it just flows off the tongue? But
well, they are truly there. It's info in my voice. I wrote that. And then also the opinions once in a while, they are my own. So I get to do that. So that's not forced at all.
Even the most of us, like, we have to pause or like think about our thoughts or, get them
I
together.
have to do that too.
Okay.
I will say
Good.
And a lot more on here with you than I do in the Wine News in 5.
Okay, good. That's the beautiful beauty of editing here. When right now it's just on Instagram. My only caveat about it, I know you also have the transcripts that you can read on Jancis.
And it is on YouTube as well now.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, except for the fact that it's not formatted for YouTube. It's formatted for Instagram. So it'll still, if you opened it on your web browser, it would be up and down, which isn't the best. But I'm also doing all of this. And so I'm not a tech person. I've had to learn a lot in order to even know what a teleprompter is.
Yeah, but that's the business today, right? We get to Google it and figure it out like you did to be able to translate the Finnish language, which is one of the most difficult languages from what I understand to translate.
Google Translate is a friend. All of these things about which microphone. Oh man, I went through so many microphones.
Well,
the Rode mic
great.
is
the
one of my
lighting looks
favorites.
Great. Everything is good. The only reason I bring up the only on Instagram part is because the information is so rich that sometimes I want to pause. I want to rewind and listen to it again, but there might be just a point, and the only thing about Instagram is you can't pause or rewind and do you have to listen to the whole thing again. That's why I wanted to do it on YouTube.
But also, that is why the transcript is so excellent, because also when you read it on the site, I've included all of the links to the research I'm referencing. So you can go do a deep dive. And I think that's really important for credibility's sake and just to give people more of an avenue into the content.
Yeah. And ultimately, helps Jancis Robinson because you're driving more viewers to that site as well. So that's
I
always,
hope so.
yeah.
I hope that people who watch it are going and revisiting transcripts or being like, oh, I heard this. Where did I hear? Oh, it was the Wine News in 5. I'm going to go find that. I hope so.
Yeah. For those of you that maybe are new to wine and you don't know what we're talking about, Jancis Robinson is arguably, probably not even arguably, the foremost authority on wine. She literally wrote the book to teach us all. She was one of the first to do it. There are others that have done it well, but she was really the first to really dive into regions all around the world, bring it and publish this in multiple languages and let us know. And you guys just wrote about a year ago, maybe a couple more months, wrote the 5th edition of the Oxford Companion.
Yes, that came out near the end of 2023.
Yeah.
I think September 2023.
Somewhere.
I was going to say I have one. I'm looking at it across the room, but I'm not going to get up. That was Julia's undertaking mostly, and then Jancis and Tara as well. And Jancis in the past has headed up. There we go.
Iowa. Beautiful cover.
Jancis in the past has headed up editing all of that, or rather being the head editor for all of it. And this year they swapped. Julia's the head editor. Jancis is editing some sections, and then Tara is helping with editing as well. I contributed the section on organ, but we have like 260 some people who contribute to that massive.
That's amazing.
tome.
And to think about, I mean, I don't know when the first edition came out. You'd probably do. You know,
I actually couldn't. I would be.
I'm gonna guess it was late 70s, early 80s. That's my guess. We'll fact check at some point. Actually, we'll fact check right here, Matt. The first edition of the Oxford Companion was published in 1994, 31 years ago. But the fact that like Jancis probably did most of that by herself in the beginning. Maybe she had a copywriter or an editor, but
I would guess that the vast majority of it was her. You know, I should ask her about that. It's evolved so much since the first edition. I think that it is a perfect example of why once you have the book, you don't always have it. You do need to get updated editions.
That's true. And the wine world is always changing, as evidence in Wine News in 5.
Yeah.
So let's jump in there, because one of the reasons that we got acquainted is I wrote you on Instagram. You were talking about the FTC's regulation of Southern Glazers, kind of their regulation of big business and volume discounts. Let me preface this by saying, believe me, I'm on your side. Anybody who ever has met me or listened to me talk about wine, my first tip, hack to getting into the wine business or learning about wine is align yourself and have a dialogue with a local retailer. That being said, there has always been volume discounts, right? And I get it. You were making the point. Sorry, I'm speaking for you, and you tell me if I'm wrong. You were making the point, summarizing that when we have the large wholesalers constantly pushing volume in the big box stores, the Costco's of the world, the Total Wines of the world, etc., Wegmans, you name it, then our choice, it basically trickles down to us as consumers getting the short end of the stick because our choices will get lessened.
Yes.
Do I have that right?
Yes. And I will also say that the FTC case with Southern Glazers it goes beyond volume discounting to the point where the law that they're using is saying it's written that you can offer volume discounts to the point where it actually benefits you as a business.
Right.
So you're selling however many cases, and this is benefiting you in transportation costs. It's benefiting you in marketing costs, whatever it is. That's a fair volume discount.
Yeah, let me unpack that really quick for the person who's listening who's not in the wine business. So when you're importing goods or you're bringing goods over, if you have your cost, let's say you get a boat, what's called a container of goods, you are paying the same amount of money whether that container is full or whether that container is half full. So the more you can pack into that boat, the less your cost of goods is going to be, essentially.
Yeah, and if you can always have one of your SKUs or one of your bottles on someone's shelf, if you can pay for that slot and it's always there, then you don't have to go through all this restocking. It's a pain in the butt to always be going through small sales volumes. So the FTC is using a rule that says up to the point where it's benefiting you as a business, you can offer volume discounts. What they found was that Southern Glazers was going way beyond that, and they're offering discounts that are beyond what benefits them as a business and gives Total Wine a lot more of an ability to sell a wine for way less money than, mom and pop over two streets down.
Sure.
And so that's really disheartening. And of course, wrapped up in that whole thing is like, how do distributors work? Well, I know a lot of distributors who say, you're in distribution. I know you know how this works. Well, you can have a case of that. But I have 10 cases of that over there that need to move. So I'm willing to sell you that, but those need to disappear somehow.
Sure.
And I think that's very unethical.
Yeah. It's the world of allocation, to let you know, people, that you sell enough, of whatever, I'll just point them out because I used to work for them. If you sell enough other Wilson Daniels products, that magically can turn into a bottle of DRC for you.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a whole bunch of things wrapped up in that. What you were driving at is that what I was saying, and yes, you got it absolutely correct. If you go to a grocery store and they are buying at volume and they are buying at discounts because they are buying at volume, there are only so many brands in the world that are able to do that. And if they're prioritizing stocking those brands, they're deprioritizing things that would be more of a hand sell and that people haven't seen before and they're uncomfortable with. And that just makes less space for those people in the world. So, like you said, find a wine shop, go to a local wine shop and talk to people, see what they're excited about. I still do this. I find most of my wines of the week for jancisrobinson.com through my local wine shops. I have one called Liner Nelson that's walking distance, another one called Cru and Domaine. I go in there and I ask people what they're excited about because they are wine lovers, and they'll tell me a whole story about a producer I'm not familiar with. Well, if I like the wine, as likely as not, that's going to end up on our site somewhere. So it's just rely more on the knowledge of people who are excited about the thing they're selling.
100%. Could not agree more. But for the sake of argument, because it's like to have good discourse and play the devil's advocate, I would argue, first of all, that is exactly like you said, the main reason that we should be buying local or small mom and pop retail is the big brands have enough. The big box stores have enough. Here's the other example, right? In North Carolina, where I live, we're in a market that I used to work up in Connecticut. They have bottle one pricing. So arguably it levels the playing field for pricing, and the big wholesalers can't push their weight around because every bottle, no matter whether you buy 20 cases, 100 cases, or one bottle, same cost, theoretically. Now, that is also detrimental to the on-premise restaurants and bars in the sense that now, let's say my Willamette Valley Pinot, right, that would cost a restaurant or a shop $20, but maybe if I buy 5 cases at my wine bar because I'm getting a volume discount, I can pour it by the glass at $15. Now that doesn't exist because I have to pay $20 like everybody else. So it's also those preferential premium spots where you can get distribution on your wine that now limits that.
Yes. And I will say, every state in the U.S. is different.
It's crazy.
It's a nightmare to look into our alcohol laws. It's incredibly confusing. If you move states, you're dealing with a whole new raft of regulations. And I think that at some point we've got to, because that is not true of every state. That's true of one state, and another state might do it a different way. And
then some states have the state runs the pricing, and so you never know what's happening. And then some, it's the wild, wild west. I can charge you $15. I can charge you $20. I can charge you $25.
Yeah. So as long as all businesses are paying the same amount, yes, it does suck to not have that volume discount on those 5 cases for your glass pour, but everyone's dealing with that.
Right.
The problem is when not everyone is dealing with the same crappy situation.
Yeah. By the way, where is the lawsuit now? Do you have
I don't have an update for you. I'm sorry. Yeah. It's gone quiet, and I'm very nervous because, as everyone who is US based knows, actually probably the entire world, we have a new incoming president, and he is much more pro big business. So are the Democrats, but a bit less so.
No, I'm with you. Well, let's jump in there then. What's your take on these impending tariffs and how they're going to affect, if you look into your glass ball?
My glass ball here. I don't know any better than anyone else. Trump has promised 10 to 15% tariffs on every imported product, regardless of origin. That extends far beyond the wine industry. We're going to have way larger fish to fry. But in the wine industry, what that would mean is everyone loses, except no, everyone loses. As a consumer, you're going to pay more for your imported wine. As a retailer, your consumers are going to be buying less imported wine. And so you're going to be looking at more options that are local, maybe. But the thing is the US labor cost is so high and land is so expensive in ideal growing regions that those wines are incredibly expensive. So even without a tariff, what you're looking at is higher prices, which then for the consumer is buy less, especially with the World Health Organization messaging on drink less at a
which, by
distributor.
The way, was also such a confusing, incomplete message. I mean, I just got my news from you, and even from you were saying, well, they didn't do this sample set, and this combats it. I mean, it was.
And now we have the Surgeon General adding on. It's so everything in the world is gray. And it really bothers me that people are so unwilling to accept the gray, and they want it to be black or white. They want alcohol is bad or alcohol is fine. And the honest answer is, if you have the BRCA gene, you're a lady with the BRCA gene. Yeah, alcohol is a contributor to breast cancer. If you don't have the BRCA gene, there's no proof that you are better or worse off if you are drinking moderately. And there's the NASEM study, the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine that just came out, showed lower all-cause mortality. So lower rates of death related to 8 different contributing factors in people who did have a glass of wine a night. Or not wine, but were moderate drinkers. They had 1 drink a day if they were a woman, or 2 if they were men. Lower all-cause mortality. Higher rates of breast cancer. These are 2 things that we have a fair amount of evidence on. But from there, you're like, okay, well, what health complications do you have? You have to do the research yourself. I can't tell you, yes, this is going to be fine for you, or no, it's not. And the medical system right now is, unfortunately, the messaging around things is fairly hard to trust, and it's hard to know where funding is coming from for certain research or for certain people who are in charge of messaging. And please view things as a grayscale and go do more research.
Yeah. By the way, my younger son's name is Gray for exactly that reason.
We don't know if you're going to be great or if you're not going to be so great.
No, it's just because it's like you said, the world is not black and white, and let's be comfortable living with gray. And
everything has an effect on everything else. So to me, I'm like, okay, it makes me happy to have a glass of wine every night. If I'm hanging out with friends, having a bottle on the table that we're sharing extends dinner. I am quite certain, I have no scientific evidence on this, but I'm quite certain that sitting at the table with my friends does wild amounts of good for my mental health. And the fact that dinner was extended and I am buoyant at the end of it, that's doing me some favors.
Amen. Absolutely. It's like when I was growing up, there was this debate, and it still lingered, but over coffee and caffeine. I think you could literally watch 5 different news programs and you would get 5 different answers. So it's like, it's good for you. It's not good for you. It's good for you. It's not good for you. It's terrible for you. It causes heart disease, blah, blah, blah. And And I think what you said is brilliant. It's like you have to do the research for you, and it's how it individually affects you, because there's certainly no question a lot of benefits to moderate wine consumption,
And
alcohol
that
consumption.
this is the key. It's like moderate anything.
Yeah.
Doing more of anything is going, exercise is not great in insane doses. Yes, we have marathoners and we have ultra marathoners, but I think for most people just living life, like it's going to, unless you're a professional athlete, you're being paid for that. Yeah, doing that much exercise is going to cut into other things that you want to do in life and negatively impact other places in your life. That can be something that's not great. Even the best things in too much, not great.
Absolutely. Speaking of names, you have a Chihuahua, right?
What do you know about my Chihuahua? I guess I maybe put that in my bio. Yes, her name is Lily.
Lily. Cool. How old is Lily?
Lily is 18. Actually, Lily might be older. We're not quite sure. She's at least 18, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
18. That's a good run.
I heard someone clicking around behind you. Who do you have?
His name's Mickey. Yeah, he was clicking around. He'll be 12 in the summer, and he sadly lost his sister Molly last year in September.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but dogs
are the best.
Dogs are the best. And I can say that they are good for your mental health for sure, and good to get you out and exercise and walk. Talk to me about the evolution of Diary of a Willamette Cellar Rat.
Oh man, going back. Okay, so this is how I started writing about wine, is that jancisrobinson.com has a writing competition every year. You should enter if you're listening and you like writing.
No, I host a podcast and a show because I cannot write.
No, but if people are listening and they like writing about wine, keep it in mind.
The listener, yes.
But I entered that, and it was in essence, it was like write a travel guide for the place you live. I wrote one about Portland. It desperately needs to be updated since the pandemic. A lot of those businesses have gone out of business. But it was shortlisted, and I didn't even wait. As soon as it was shortlisted, I wrote to Jancis and I said, hey, you haven't published a cellar journal since Richard Hemming did it 11 years ago. And I knew this because I loved Richard Hemming's. I forget what his was called, but...
Pardon the interruption, but in case you wanted to get your hands on a copy, Richard Hemming's Harvest Journal was called Grapes and Seasons. It was published on jancisrobinson.com in 2008.
It was something about a vintage casual, because was he in Australia? He did a viticulture one in England, but it was so funny. And the only part that I wanted more of was the technical piece. And I was like, I can do this. It'll be a different spin, and I can include more technical information, because at the time I was sitting for my WSET diploma exams. And I was like, this will benefit me. It'll benefit other people in diploma. And maybe I can be as funny as Richard. I am not as funny as Richard. And I discovered that probably 3 journal entries into Diary of a Willamette Valley Cellar Rat. I was like, oh man, I really have a different tone. He's hilarious. But it kept going because I wanted to keep writing and I wanted to keep working vintage. So from there, I went, and Diary of a Vintage Casual is me in Australia. I'm forgetting what his is called. And then another one in Napa. And at that point, I started, after my first vintage in Napa, I was working for Harlan Estate. And as you might expect, they're not super keen for anyone to write, even if it's an anonymous, they're not super keen for anyone to be writing about their winemaking practices.
Yeah.
So I had to discontinue.
Let listeners know, if you don't know what Harlan is, it is one of the premier estates in Napa Valley. It's one of those icon wines, kind of, if you've heard the likes of like Screaming Eagle up in those rafters.
And they are truly incredible, doing groundbreaking R&D. And it was such a pleasure to get to work with them. But I did have to stop writing harvest journals. And so I started writing about other things like labor and viticulture. And from there, moved back up here to Oregon and became the Pacific Northwest specialist. And then last August became the U.S. editor. So that all started with Diary of a Willamette Valley Cellar Rat.
So the idea was, well, actually, let's rewind and figure out the idea. Because so you were chasing harvest. This is something that people who geek out about wine and want to be in, they go work harvest. And like you said, you worked in Australia and France.
No, oh, I had such plans, man. I had so many plans. I never intended to like working vintage or working harvest as much as I did. I thought that I was going to open a WSET approved program provider and teach people about wine.
Gotcha.
Now, I do teach people about wine. I teach WSET classes for a school that I don't own at this point. But at that point, I was like, I'm going to open my own school. I'm moving back to Colorado. I worked 2 harvests in Willamette Valley. The second one is the Harvest Journal. But it was such an insanely good experience. It was like summer camp and college and all rolled into one. And the food and the wine and the people and the being with, I think these days it's really hard to find community, as an adult. Maybe if you grew up somewhere your whole life, but I moved around a lot, and finding friends as an adult and people that you really mesh well with is a challenge. It takes time, especially now that we work from home. You work harvest with a good team, and I had an incredible team, was the most fun I've ever had. So to make a long story longer, after Willamette Valley, I was like, I want to go make wine somewhere else. One of my previous fellow interns was like, you've got to go to Australia and work for this winery over there. It's awesome. Got on a plane in January of 2020 and went and collected my diploma in London, met Jancis for the first time. I'd been writing for her for a bit for the Diary of Willamette Valley Cellar Rat, but I hadn't actually ever met her. Met Jancis, collected my diploma, flew to Australia, touched down at the beginning of February, and started to work in the winery. And by the last day of March, I had to get out on the last flight. It was the last between states flight going from Adelaide to Sydney, because they closed state borders in Australia.
Sure.
So it was actually harder to get from Adelaide to Sydney than Sydney to the US. And then Sydney to the US was considered a repatriation flight. So that was a bit easier.
But you were able to get back in.
Able to get back in, was incredibly bummed about the fact that I was able to get back in. I really wanted to get stuck in Australia. I really wanted to keep working. But yes, I got sent home. And then I was supposed to go to Austria, and I was supposed to work for a winery called Solomon Undhof. And Bert Solomon he's just one of the friendliest people. I met him when I went to dinner with Jancis, and this is embarrassing to say, but I almost didn't talk to Jancis. She talked to my grandmother all dinner, and I talked to Bert. And so at the end of dinner, Bert said, well, come work in Austria when you're done in Australia. Couldn't make it. Borders are closed. Not going to get a visa to Austria. I'm on the phone with my friend. Ben. He works as the sommelier and wine buyer at Canard and Le Pigeon in Portland, which are great restaurants. And he's like, just go work in the Valley again. And I was like, I don't want to make Pinot and Chardonnay again. I did that. And he goes, well, if you want to work with different grape varieties, go to Napa. And I was like, so uncool. Napa, I don't want to go to Napa. Napa's like Disneyland. And he was like, you're such a snob. Go to Napa. Like, they'll teach you things. And I don't know if he knew the full extent of how true that was. But Napa might be the best place in the world to work vintage, because people who are interns and cellar masters in Napa, this probably makes some people mad at me, but they would be head winemakers a lot of other places in this country for like a significant amount of time. There's so much knowledge in that valley. It's the only place I've worked vintage, and take that with a grain of salt because I've only worked 5 vintages, but that people would come in and they'd be like, did you see what the American Journal of Science and Enology, ASEV, and Viticulture published yesterday? They published this thing. Did you see that person's report on this? Did you see the report on this tree and the mycorrhizal relationship with this plant? And these were interns
Yeah.
that were doing this. They're like, did you see that report on smoke taint? Did you see this? Just everyone constantly reading, constantly. And yeah, there was some one-upism. But the thing about one-upism is it's not all bad. A lot of times it does push you to go learn more. And I felt so out of my depth that it became pretty regular for me to go home at 10 o'clock after cleaning up the winery and dive into vitinology reports. So if you want that, go to Napa.
There you go. I think that's such an interesting take on things because, us in the wine industry, we poo-poo on Napa because, like you said, we think of it as like Disney World and this like fake fugazi, beautified world. But there's a reason that it got there. And now being more than 50 years of commercial success and obviously being recognized in the Tasting of Paris and stuff like that, that's still kind of the crown jewel of the U.S., at least for recognizable places outside of the U.S. and people like where they look for great American wine.
Definitely. I regularly look at what's in the UK, of course, because we're largely a UK-based publication. And there are a lot of distributors there that I noticed that they're buying Napa, they're buying Sonoma, maybe they're buying Willamette Valley, and they're not importing anything else. And that really, really limits what's going over and like what people are exposed to. But it is because there's such a reputation for quality. And I think that the worst thing about Napa that you could say is that a lot of the wines are boring because they look so much like each other. Yeah. But the technical expertise is insane. And the reason that a lot of wines look like each other, like other wines, is because it's not because the producer is trying to do that. It's because the market is demanding that.
Yeah. It's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, it's exactly like you said, because the wines are so polished to the point where they can achieve this greatness. But I think those of us that have tasted that greatness, it's almost like an embarrassment of riches. Now we want like the flawed, the elbow grease wines, the one that you could taste, the sweat from the winemaker in them almost. So I think that sums it up perfectly.
And if you want variety from a region where they have almost a monoculture, I mean, Vitis vinifera is a monoculture, but like one single grape variety, you have to go and buy those wines. So Oregon has Gamay planted. California has some great Chenin Blanc. But if you want more Oregon Gamay and you want more California Chenin Blanc, you should probably go buy Oregon Gamay and California Chenin Blanc, and you should probably expect and accept the fact that people haven't been doing decades and decades of winemaking on these two varieties. So the end product may not be as polished as Cabernet or Pinot Noir, which everyone has this hive mind and has been trading knowledge and training people who then become winemakers. And so they know it's like dialed in. Willamette Valley is dialed in Pinot Noir and Chardonnay.
Yep.
We have a higher percentage of Pinot Noir planted in the Willamette Valley than Burgundy does. Like that's what we do. So
a higher percentage. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I want to get into something else because you were talking about, I can't go leave this because you talked about the beauty of working harvest and working a vintage and it being, you summed it up perfectly, like summer camp and college or college parties all together. When Kimberly Nichols of Napa Valley's Markham Winery was on the show a few weeks ago, I asked her what was the best harvest party she ever had. And she couldn't divulge all of the details, but she said one word. She said tequila. What do you remember most about the best, or what's the most memorable moment you can divulge about a harvest party?
Oh, I've got two. The first one was the winemaker, so much fun. And he filled up all of the picking bins that didn't have it was a macro bin.
Okay.
And he filled the macro bins with different levels of hot water. And so there were like 1 million hot tubs and then cold plunges.
Oh.
Everybody was sitting in macro bins, drinking excellent champagne that was really fun. Another one was in Australia. The winery that I was working for made a very, very sweet wine. It was
Sticky.
It was a sticky. It was about 150 grams per liter residual sugar, so equivalent to like Sauterne.
Jeez.
And they kept reserve of these, so they had like way back vintages. And every year at the harvest party, they would make all of the interns skull. Actually, make is the wrong word because then they'd get in trouble. They would ask all the interns if they would like to skull a half bottle, which means chug a half bottle of sticky that was 150 grams residual sugar, and you'd race, and they would bet on you. They'd be like, well, I'm putting my money on this intern for who can chug it.
Yeah. How'd you do, Sam?
I placed third, and I was the underdog. Everybody thought that I was going to come last. So that was a pretty good result.
Somebody won some good money on you, hopefully.
Maybe. I don't think anyone bet on me.
No, nobody bet on you. They'll know better next time. Okay, speaking of betting on, so we were talking about Napa Valley is the crown jewel, and Willamette Valley, and that's kind of what people in other countries know the U.S. for. You're the U.S. senior editor. What should be on our radar for consumers, wine professionals alike, of emerging U.S. wine regions?
Okay, so I have to admit something to you here.
Please.
Because I do the Wine News in 5, and because my responsibilities are not solely reviewing U.S. wine, I have a limited amount of time, and I don't get to spend nearly as much time on up-and-coming regions as I would like, because what people would like reviews on are things that they know and love. So Napa, Willamette Valley, maybe Santa Cruz Mountains, maybe Paso. I wish I had more of this knowledge. However, I will try and give you what I think you should know about. I think that you should pay attention to Oregon sparkling wine. At this point, it has been, Argyle's been making sparkling wine for decades, but there are so many producers in Willamette Valley who are making sparkling wine now. And some of them are making very good sparkling wine. And some of them are making late disgorged sparkling wine.
Argyle is.
Yes, but there are little producers who are doing it too. And it's started happening because there's a company called Radiance, and they were doing custom riddling, disgorging. They had all sparkling wine equipment is really, really expensive. So if you don't have the equipment, it could be hard to make sparkling wine. But if you have someone who's going around the valley who will do that for you, it makes it a lot easier. Well, this company came into being and a bunch of people started using them. And now there are 2, and the other one is Vinovate, and they're new. So you're just going to see more sparkling wine coming out of Oregon. And I encourage you to try those. Another thing I would pay attention to, California Chenin Blanc, Alder Yarrow, who is my colleague and has been writing about California for far longer than I have, and has the blog Vinography, which is incredible, just wrote a feature on California Chenin Blanc, and it's super good, super in-depth. I would take his recommendations for Chenin. I think that the rest of the country is doing some cool stuff.
Yeah.
I would love to tell you more about that. I would love to talk to you about wine in Virginia, but I'm not actually the person to do that because it's not exported to the UK. So I would instead direct you to someone like Siddal McCall, who was a Finnis fellow, but he writes for multiple publications and he's based there, and he will wax poetic about Virginia wine scene.
So if it doesn't get exported into the UK, it doesn't get written about? Is that kind of the rule of thumb?
No, I can write about wines that are not exported to the UK. But the way that happens is usually, so I'll go to Paso and I'll do a review on Paso, and I'll taste any wines that their regional body has called for me. But I'm really unlikely to go out into the middle of nowhere where nobody's exported and review a bunch of wine. However, I also do accept wine submissions from anywhere in the country.
Gotcha.
And you can email me and you can say, hey, would you be willing to taste our wines from Maryland, from Virginia, from Arizona? Yeah. And odds are I will say yes.
I have to think that Jancis, somebody, an importer over there, is taking note of what's going on in New York State, only because you look at the investment there from wine producers like Louis Barrault of Chateau Saint Côme and Gigondas, Paul Hobbs, who's bought vineyard space there, and Johannes Selbach. So, and there's more that I'm thinking, but just that point of validation, I'd have to think that some exporter importer in the UK is going to be like, oh, we got to get these wines over here, and then can give you, or so I just need to write to that, or I'll just tell like the Paul Hobbs guys, hey, invite Samantha out because she needs to come see this.
Or send me wines, which is far easier. Invitations are wonderful, and I would love to visit every producer in the US, but that's not going to happen. I don't have that much time. I got to put out content too.
You can ride on the plane.
Some people are very good at that. Yeah. I have ADHD and it doesn't go so well for me.
On the plane.
There's so many distractions. There's so much noise. Generally speaking, I work in this room. And even if I can hear my neighbor behind me, because I share an office wall with my next door neighbor, it distracts me, which is unfortunate. Jancis, however, man, that woman can get out 3 reports on a plane ride. It's crazy. She's very efficient.
But you also, I think I read somewhere, one of the reasons that Jancis hired you is because you write prolifically. Like you're putting out, I think the stat you used was like 3 to 4 times what some of the writers that were currently employed at the time at Jancis were writing.
I don't think that's true. I think that the Wine News in 5 is very okay. So I think in terms of writing, it is far easier to put out regular content if it follows a formula. So the Wine News in 5, I write it on Thursday. Tara and Andrew edit it Friday morning because Andrew's in the UK, Tara's in New York. And then I get to my desk. I go through their edits. I edit it, send it back to them. They send me back final copy by probably 11. And then I record. So that takes me most of Thursday and Friday. Mm-hmm. But I can get that out. That's almost always the same. It can get boring sometimes.
That was one of my questions is you're a journalist, so I'd love to dig into your mind about resources and where you're getting your information from those things.
Okay. Give me one more second to finish this thought, and then I will get to that.
Okay.
But so that's most of my Thursday, Friday. But in terms of other content, it's so much harder when you're not working on a formula. So if I'm writing an original piece that's looking at, these are some of my favorites, but like Tony Soder, who started Soder Wines in the Willamette Valley. But before that, he's like one of the best unknown consultants. People in Napa know him if they're in the industry, but if you're coming up in the wine industry now, people don't really think about Tony.
Right.
And yet he was so important. But going back in a story like that, that'll take me 2 weeks to write. And I would say the only reason that I can be prolific is because of the Wine News in 5 and because that's considered a piece, if I'm even considered prolific. I don't think Tara would say I am. I think she'd say I produce a pretty normal amount of content.
Okay. Wait, so
okay.
How often are you traveling though to do pieces?
Not as much as I was last year. And honestly, that'll probably stay the same for this year because traveling takes a lot out of you. As we discussed, I'm not that good at writing on a plane. If I'm gone for a week and writing up tasting notes and seeing a region and spending time with producers, that's a week that I'm not in my chair at my desk writing content. And then it'll probably take me another week to put everything together and get it out. So that's 2 weeks of work for a few pieces, which is sometimes worth it. But the other thing that I'm working on right now is my Master of Wine Studies. So you will probably see more pieces that are geared towards MW studies in the future here. I have
Okay.
until June. June is when I sit my exam again. So I would expect things like grape variety, tasting reports from that grape all over the world, or like Chardonnay from everywhere. And what's the difference between Chardonnay from Napa Valley and Chardonnay from Sonoma and Chardonnay from Willamette and then Burgundy, that kind of thing, rather than lots of travel.
So you kind of kill two birds with one stone. You're writing for your MW and you're writing for your profession.
That's what I'm hoping.
I love it.
You asked about resources. My favorite resource is people emailing me information.
Oh, I thought you were going to say People Magazine. I was like, what?
No. People emailing me information that other people do not have yet. That is my favorite source of information.
Plug for you. Where should they email you?
News at jancisrobinson.com.
News at jancisrobinson.com.
Yes, please. It's so much more exciting when I have firsthand reports on flooding in Brazil or, drought in Spain than if I have to go through a million different news articles in Spanish and use an online translator to try and figure out if the wine industry has been impacted, what the impact has been, who people can send money to, who people can contact. That'll take me more than a Thursday. So yes, please, primary sources, much beloved. Other than that, I am digging through every news site for wine. So Just Drinks, Meiningers, Harper's. I'm going through university publications to see what their latest research was. And then I'm reading reports on that, deciding whether or not that's super important for consumers to know. I am subscribed to every time I find a new one, I'll subscribe to a new news site. So it'll be like Wines of Australia they'll have news updates. Subscribe to that. Wines of New Zealand, Wines of South Africa. Vitisphere is a French news publication for wine. I'm subscribed to that. Yes, I have to translate everything. But
and also for somebody with ADHD, those notifications are popping up on your screen all the freaking time.
I don't allow that. Those are not, I do not allow notifications on my screen. Also, it is, sometimes I think I was better suited to running around a winery or a restaurant floor because it is so hard to concentrate all day long at a desk. And I think a lot of people in the wine industry are built this way. I think if you took a sample size for the wine industry and you're like, how many people have ADHD? It's a lot larger than people who are working corporate jobs.
Absolutely.
Because we like to be up and moving. It's one of the reasons we got into wine is to be a sommelier on the floor or to be in production, running around. You have physical stimulation. It means that you don't have to rely as much on like a medication to keep focused.
Totally. But yet that's interesting because you said that you're best when you're at your desk writing.
Yeah, because if I'm not, then I'm completely unfocused.
Right.
I can take in a lot of information. I can take lots of notes. But in terms of crafting a piece, it's best when I am at my desk.
That makes sense. I find, like I alluded to earlier, I am not a good writer. I think I'm well-spoken and I have good ideas, but I am not a good writer. And that is why I am so thankful to be living in this age of technology where you can talk to text, you can have an AI organize your thoughts, because then you could just think out loud and it puts it together, and then you can edit it and make it sound like you actually can write something. So
I'm not sure how I feel about AI. In some ways,
that you wouldn't love that part of it, being a skilled writer yourself.
Yeah, but in some ways, it's just, you don't get to decide how the world changes, and it has made many people's lives easier. And I don't think it's coming from my job because it can't call people and ask for their opinion on things. Like it can only compile the information you give it.
That's it.
Man, I have asked AI so many questions and it has been wrong so many times. It's getting better though. It's getting better.
Well, my biggest problem with it is pronunciation, especially in the wine business. Like, Romani Conti is like, you can imagine the things that come out. If anybody wants to laugh, go tell your AI Romani Conti and see what comes out. But Sam, I've taken up a lot of your time, and I want to leave you with this question. Well, I'll ask two questions. One, what should we look for coming up in the wine news in 5, like some big trending topics?
I'm sorry. I don't know
Ask
because
you on Thursday.
everything could change on Thursday. There could
Right.
be a new last week. It was Thursday and the US Surgeon General was like, hey, we should revise the dietary guidelines and people should drink less. And you're like, ooh, okay, that's big news. I'm going to
Right.
include that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I love that answer. That means it's genuine and fresh, and not contrived. Lastly, you're never supposed to ask a woman their age, at least where the background that I come up to. I'm just going to say, from my perspective, you're a young person in this business. I alluded to in the opening that you are a rising titan in this business. What is the end game? You're sitting for your MW for the WSET, which is a Master of Wine. It's the highest level you can get in on that side of the education, wine education. What do you want to look back and your legacy be in the wine business or in the
Okay.
world in general?
So I have to correct this first. WSET and IMW are completely different organizations. The WSET is usually what you go through before you get to the IMW, but you don't have to do. So that doesn't.
I don't think I came through the court, so I don't think I ever knew that. So, but most people who become an MW
have taken WSET through the diploma level, which is the end of the Wine and Spirits Education Trust.
Thank you for
level.
Clarifying that. Okay.
Yeah, it's confusing, but I have people who I'm in the program with who went through the enology programs and they didn't take WSET and they're still in the Master of Wine program. So what would I like my legacy to be? I don't think we've gotten there yet. I think the Wine News in 5 is really fun and I'm glad it's taken off, but that is not, my end goal is not to be a news reporter.
Yeah.
I really, really love, and this sounds cliche and it is what everybody loves, but I love the regionality of wine. But I don't just love the regionality of wine. I love the regionality of agriculture. So like what specifically grows in what place, and this idea of what grows together goes together in terms of eating. But it's more than that. It's like, what is your climate ideally suited to grow? We've decided to put wine in all sorts of places where maybe it's not actually ideal. Maybe we should be making perry, and maybe we should be making more hard cider. Maybe there's like a cactus that was traditionally fermented to make an alcoholic beverage. And globalization is it's a great thing. It's an awful thing wherever you come down, but it's kind of steamrolled a lot of food regionality. Like it's weird that we eat pork and beef, and then if we go to Australia, someone to be like, oh, I can't believe you ate kangaroo. Like kangaroo there, you're probably better off eating kangaroo and breeding kangaroos even, maybe, than eating beef. They've got a lot of beef too. But there's sustainability aspect to regionality and farming and like what foods were traditional to a region and what can grow together and like what's a companion crop. So there's way more research happening in this area, but it's still super, super small. And I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but there's more and more research being done on co-planting and what can you grow next to a vineyard. And we haven't even touched what is enhancing a vineyard's growth. What other crops could you co-plant? What crops can you not? There's a chemical in black walnuts called juglone that affects growth of all the other plants around it. And so it'll inhibit everything. And people are like, well, we should put trees in vineyards. And you're like, well, you shouldn't put that one in a vineyard. And so there's this whole little sphere of knowledge that's just coming into being. And I would like my legacy to have something to do with that and writing about co-planting and regionality of food and drinks, not always wine.
Amazing. This might be on the PS of the thing, but you just reminded me of something that I meant to ask you because you said it in the last Wine News in 5. Can you quickly tell us what Kokumi is?
So Kokumi is apparently, I just found this out, is apparently the 6th taste, and it's not really a taste. It's more of a texture, a richness. Yeah, a richness of flavor.
So like sweet, salty, bitter, sour,
umami, and then
Kokumi.
Kokumi. And Really, Japan has had this for a very long time. We're just catching up.
Amen. There you go. Well, Sam, this has been so enlightening and so much fun. I really appreciate you being so generous with your time. And I'll say, all of you out there, get yourself a subscription to jancisrobinson.com. Read Samantha Cole-Johnson stuff and make sure you follow her on Instagram. Make sure you tune in to the Wine News in 5. It comes out every Friday night. And then you will learn how and where to drink deliciously.
Thank you.